Hello, everyone. This is going to be a examination of what is a obviously blatant fraud present in the official English translation of the Codex Sinaiticus that was found by Tischendorf in the 1800s, and this is the oldest complete New Testament that was ever found. But the rest are all, basically crumbs until you get to uh, well, there are no complete New Testaments until 340 A.D. So this was the earliest, and so what it has more presumptive authority than most any other manuscript, and that's by consensus. It may change in the future that the dating is in 340 A.D., but we'll see. Anyway, in 2 Peter 1:10 uh, was the issue we were dealing with in a prior video. And this, so let's remind ourselves what is 2 Peter 1:10, where this fraud is occurring in the English translation of Sinaiticus. Wherefore, the rather, brethren, give diligence. And the Sinaiticus, the way we understood it from last time, is that the words "good works" are not there in the Greek, because the English translation did not have the words "good works" in it. And so based on that, relying upon that, we concluded last time that the only manuscript that didn't have the words "good works" in it was the Sinaiticus, and we'll go into that. So wherefore, the rather, brethren, give diligence to make your calling and election sure, for if you do these things, you shall never fall. Now, it makes a huge difference theologically if you have to give diligence and good works to make sure of your calling and election, because then salvation is only made sure based on what you need to be doing. So in order to make sure you will be saved, you have to do good works, which is consistent with Jesus, is consistent with James, but is inconsistent with Paul. We showed last time that it's hard to explain how Erasmus put together what later became known as the Textus Receptus and omitted the words "good works" in there. That's what we deduced was where the error happened in his doing his collation. He was collating multiple Greek New Testaments, and he evidently simply copied by and inadvertently did not include those two words, "good works." So, but the words "good works" in verse 1, chapter 1, verse 10 of 2 Peter had "good works" in the Vulgate Latin and two copies of Beza. That's important. Codex Beza was from 400 AD, so that's very old. The Vulgate Latin is 405 AD, so those go back well in time. So the two copies of Beza's read "good works" or "by your good works," and that was in Gill's exposition. So that was a strong indication that the earliest church had this all along. Okay, and then I pointed out that here on the right side, you see here the earliest strains of the New Testament dating, including the Latin Vulgate of the early 400s, the Alexandrian text, and two source texts that Beza obtained. That's the Codex, the D manuscript obtained, have this "good works" bolded above. And those texts were all available, not the Alexandrinus, but the Beza text, the Latin text, and other manuscripts of the Greek New Testament were all in Erasmus's hands, and he had no manuscript that was missing the words "good works." In other words, now I then quoted the public commentary saying two ancient manuscripts, the Alexandrine, meaning the Alexandrinus from the 400s, that's the date it came from, and the Sinaitic, and it means the Codex Sinaiticus, says through your good works. So through your good works, you make your calling and election sure, not by faith alone, but by your good works, you're going to make your calling and election sure. And that was in the public commentary. To the left, you'll see I mentioned, this is my original slide. I said all manuscripts except one discovered in the late 1800s has good works. And then I said, I'll get into this later, and I'll talk to you later. And I assumed at that time that I was reading a true and honest translation of Codex Sinaiticus in the online official website for Codex Sinaiticus by an international project that maintains custody of the Sinaiticus, its translation, and so on. Okay, but it turns out that the Codex Sinaiticus, in its English translation that is currently at the official webpage, and we're going to look at it in a second, is completely wrong. The words "good works" are there, and they translate it in English as if it isn't there. So now, I had said in the prior video series. The public commentary is wrong. It is missing in the Septuagint. So public commentary was saying what? That the Sinaiticus, the Codex Sinaiticus had the words good works. But when you look at the official current English translation online, you don't find it. So let's go look at what I'm talking about. This is the official, semi-official Codex Sinaiticus website maintained by in an international project of academics from all over the world, because this is a document of world significance. And let me just show you the verse that we were looking at. This is verse, when you go to their webpage and you look up the verse 2 Peter 1:10, this is what it reads. Wherefore, the brethren, be diligent to make your calling and election sure. For in doing these things you shall never stumble. Now, it doesn't say how you would make your salvation sure. It could be just by having more faith, not losing faith, because faith alone is all that supposedly saves you. But Peter doesn't have that view. He has the belief that good works are what is necessary to maintain your salvation, and you can't just go living in sin and just rely on faith, or a one-time faith, which is traditional standard doctrine today. So this verse is inimical to the Protestant Reformation, and this is being discovered. A mistake happened by Erasmus. I don't think he had any doctrinaire position that he would have done this deliberately. But later in the 1800s, doctrine had solidified again, faith alone. There's no way good works has anything to do with making your calling and election sure. So this is inimical to Christianity of this era, particularly in American-speaking, English-speaking lands. But this is what you would see even now. I double-checked. This is still how it looked, and that's my actual text I provided back in a few months ago when I did this video. So let's look at what is the Codex Sinaiticus. And so this is a literary crime against the Bible, in my view, because somebody made an English translation and deliberately foisted this off as true for the Sinaiticus. What we have, though, at the Sinaiticus is we also have the original Greek all typed up. However, it's in very small print. It's very hard to read, but there is a way to translate it. And I did it tonight, and I found a way to do it and show you and prove to you that the words good works are in there. And we'll see briefly. But here's the Codex Sinaiticus and how significant it is in world history. So any corruption and fraud, this is a fraud on on our minds, on our theology, by not telling us what Peter says. So, and it also influences how people read Peter in 2 Peter chapter 2. If they knew what's in chapter 1 properly, then what you're reading in chapter 2, you would see much more clearly how it's really dealing with the issue of Paul. But I digress. So let's read this paragraph here. Codex Sinaiticus, one of the most important books in the world. This is from this official Codex Sinaiticus site. Handwritten well over 1,600 years ago, the manuscript contains the Christian Bible in Greek, including the oldest complete copy of the New Testament. Its heavily corrected text is of outstanding importance for the history of the Bible and the manuscript. The oldest substantial book to survive antiquity is of supreme importance for the history of the book. I hope we grasp the importance of this book. So a fraud on this book, and the way we are led to believe what its contents are, is of enormous significance. And you can see theologically it spins the faith alone doctrine on its head and throws it into the trash can. But Jesus's doctrines rise, and Peter's doctrines rise, and that's key. Then on the bottom part of it, and this is where this site seems to be an official repository of the Sinaiticus, and they have the original. The Codex Sinaiticus project is an international collaboration to reunite the entire manuscript in digital form and make it accessible to a global audience for the first time. Now, I think the manuscript is actually at the British Museum, but they made a digital version of it. So this means a lot of time and expense went into it, and they created an international project of this, and they're maintaining custody of these digital versions of this. Drawing on the expertise of leading scholars, conservators, and curators, the project gives everyone the opportunity to connect directly with this famous manuscript. Okay, but the predicate of all this is destroyed if the manuscript translation that we're seeing is corrupted. Now, if you're a scholar, you can dig deep, and even there it's a little difficult because the typeface is so small, you have to do some computer magic, but I figured a way to do it tonight, and I double-checked. All right. So we will move forward. Now, what I did is I went over to the text, and you can see how small it is, and it's hard to read, but you can see the words, and I'll show you what they are later. But they're over here. These words here, right there. So there's two words there that say good works. Okay, and here it is. I just used the cursor, grabbed the text, and put it into a block of text. And just to check myself real quick, I ran it through Google Translate. And interestingly, when you translate using Google Translate with modern Greek, you can usually see some of the Greek text come out alive. And there it is. The words good works showed up right away. And I go, okay, I better read this little small text, put it out, make it look big. And there it is. You could see plain as day the words involved there. Okay, and now you can verify what's visible at the Sinaiticus.net webpage, where that's that official international project webpage. And I grabbed the text from that. You can now verify that text matches up with the same words, kalon ergon, in Titus 2, verse 14. And so it's identical. You can see with your own eyes here, it's identical words inside of the Codex Sinaiticus online Greek, not the English. The English reads the way I have that little block text where it says, be diligent to make your calling and election sure, but it leaves off by good works. And that's the difference between truth and a lie, truth and a fraud. All right, so next I decided to try to find out what's the history of the English translation of the Codex Sinaiticus that could possibly explain what happened here. It turns out if you type in the word sinaiticus.org, it will auto switch to yahadblogs.org/nt, and you'll see this indication that it's likely is from this man. This man is H.T. Anderson. I'll get into that in a minute. In 1861, he translated the New Testament Codex Sinaiticus from the Sinaitic manuscript discovered by Constantine Tischendorf at Mount Sinai. So that gave me a clue that this would be possibly where this came from. What's very interesting is the project is supported by Jackson Snyder, and I believe he's someone who has like messianic background, or he tries to encourage a messianic Christianity. And he said this. He says, do not rely solely on the English translation of the Sinaitic manuscripts, either here or at the digitalization project site. So what we were looking at was the digitalization project site. Both are driven by the theologies and traditions of the translators. But for this discovery tonight, I would have thought that never would happen. That sounded like a complete objective collaboration of international scholars, but obviously it isn't, because they have a fraud right on their web page. And so he suggests translate your own Sinaiticus using the Sinaiticus Workshop 1.4. So that's something for other people to consider. But I'm on an avenue trying to discover. So is this guy the source of where this translation went wrong? So let's take a look. I'm going to jump a little bit ahead here because I want you to see something. So he did this book. He did this book. It's entitled The New Testament, translated from the Sinaitic manuscript discovered by Constantine Tischendorf at Mount Sinai by H.T. Anderson. It was published in 1918. But this man died in 1872, I believe. Yes. So this publication itself is well after the fact. But this is the only translation that I could find in English. And there it is, the mistake. Not mistake, but in this case, a serious either fraud, or by himself, or maybe people after he died fraudulently represented this text as a translation of the Sinaiticus, because that's what it sounds like. Doesn't this sound like this is a translation of Sinaiticus, what you're looking right there? Well, I'm going to show you why it likely wasn't even that, and somebody was trying to market it as if it were. And that's maybe the marketers are the people, these people who got control of the manuscript as heirs, and they tried to change it, and you'll see why I think that. Anyway, so let's read this. It's missing the words good works. This is page 290 of that work. Wherefore, the rather, brethren, be diligent to make your calling and election sure. Doesn't say by good works, for in doing these things you shall never stumble. So there's your clear translation of somebody representing to translate the Codex Sinaiticus into English. And you'll see, I tried to find out, is there some other source that ever did this? And I couldn't find it, but maybe there is. And it'd be interesting to see what it translates it as. But what also became evident is that this man, Mr. Anderson, according to the background history at this other webpage called the Bible, you see up here, bible-researcher.com/anderson1.html. This explains that he originally did another work in 1866 in just doing a New Testament translation from the original Greek. And so that book did not have any reflection of the Codex Sinaiticus. Then, after he's dead, long after he's dead in 1872, it is sold. I believe what's happening is it was resold in 1918 by, and look at the publishing company, Standard Publishing Company. It's not a biblical publishing company, so they would have had high standards. And even the summary here by Bible Researcher is actually seems to be telling you it's a fraud. The whole work was a fraud to pretend it was the Codex Sinaiticus. And so I'm putting some of the blame on the people who were his heirs. Watch this. It says here, this purports to be an English version of Codex Sinaiticus, but in fact it is a revision of Anderson's earlier translation of the New Testament. So see, if he's translating and he's using the mistake of the King James Bible, because it's relying upon Erasmus's mistake, instead of looking at the Codex Sinaiticus, then it's not ethical for him to sell a book saying this is a translation of the Codex Sinaiticus. He's really using his original translation, using as what he thought was the Textus Receptus that was valid. But imagine if Erasmus made a mistake in collating what is famously known as the Textus Receptus, which were what he thought were the best Greek manuscripts to look at. But he made a mistake. He dropped out two words that were in all the earlier manuscripts without any variant. Okay, so anyway, but listen to what they say. It purports to be an English version of the Codex Sinaiticus, but in fact is a revision of Anderson's earlier work of the New Testament with alterations according to some of the readings of the Codex Sinaiticus. So it wasn't a systematic, complete comparison between the Codex Sinaiticus and the current text, basically the Textus Receptus version. The preface gives no information about what source Anderson used. So where did he get his information on what the Codex Sinaiticus said? He might have got it secondhand, reading some articles about it, but himself, he's not looking at this is back in the 1860s, 70s. He died in 1872. He's never seen a digitized version of this Bible. He's never seen it in person. So he's not a scholar competent to do this work. Yet this is apparently what the official webpage I just showed you, the project team page, is relying on, because his translation matches what they have. It is said that the version was prepared by Anderson shortly before his death in 1872. So maybe he's scrambling as he's dying, trying to help maybe his family, but maybe he's exaggerating it. Maybe he's participating in what's going to constitute a fraud. And the minute he's dead, it's going to be, can we make some money out of this? And I think is what happened. And in 1918, someone in their family said, hey, grandpa, dad, whoever it was, I don't know, we don't know who it was, promoted this as a translation of that Sinaiticus, and that's how it got into the official web page. But of course, they don't want to fix it either. They can see the erga, kalon, erga, but they don't want to fix that. So anyway, I just want to point out one more thing: is if you look up H.T. Anderson as a translator, you will see dozens and dozens of books being sold called the New Testament or called the Codex Sinaiticus translation. I mean, this fraud and this family or whoever it is, or somebody is making a lot of money out of this, and it's all based on a lie. Not his original New Testament translation. That'd be fine, because that's his relying upon Erasmus, basically using the Textus Receptus and doing a fresh translation. Everybody can do that if they wanted to. But his second one in 1918, after he's dead, is released saying this is a translation of the Codex Sinaiticus. That is false, and yet that's still how it's titled to this day. Okay, I want to make another point is H.T. Anderson doesn't show up in Wikipedia. Despite, if you do a Google on his name, you'll see all these books that are being sold on Amazon and topics in Bible Researcher and so on about this book, about the Sinaiticus translation he made, and yet he isn't even in Wikipedia. There's no article about him. Let me just show you something. So if you research H.T. Anderson in Wikipedia, you get nothing. If you type in his full name, you still get nothing. Very strange. So, but I want to go back and show you something. Here is the summary of his biography that the author at Bible Researcher did. So he must have dug it up and found some biographical information. Henry Tompkin Anderson was a schoolmaster and a preacher in the Campbellite Disciples of Christ denomination. He was born and raised in Virginia, but spent most of his life in Kentucky. He produced his translation of the New Testament during the years 1861-64, during the Civil War, by the way, while residing in Harrodsburg, Kentucky. The story of his labors is told by his friend John August Williams in a chapter of his reminiscences reproduced below. Anyway, so he seems to have been a Christian of a denomination that would be probably consistent with not wanting the words good works to be in there. But I don't think this is actually that issue here. I think this is somebody who's trying to make a dollar, his family, after this man's dead, claiming something that the man probably would never have endorsed in his lifetime. He'd say, he might have said, with some variants of the Codex Sinaiticus reflected herein, because how did he ever go see it? Did he go over to the British Museum where this thing is kept? I don't think so, but he could have. How did he get any versions in his custody? He probably heard secondhand that there were variants, and he then took that and made those changes. But he did not do a systematic variation review, likely, and yet his family sold it as if he had. That's at least what seems to be the case, and this is clearly one perfect proof of that. This is clearly one where I showed you the Codex Sinaiticus clearly had good works in 2 Peter 1, verse 10. So then I dug around and I thought, well, here's maybe a good book, but it turned out to be terrible. It's by Frederick Scrivener, who's an excellent scholar, clearly, and he was going to make a full collation of the Codex Sinaiticus with the received text of the New Testament. And although this book's only 140 pages long, there's not a word of English except the numbers. And sometimes it'll say, an English name and say C, whatever. But never any explanation of anything. And there's no table of contents. It's one of the worst, most disastrous books I've ever seen. And on the most important text that's ever been found of the Bible. Let me just show you something. So it was written in 1864. The Civil War is going on, so you might have to forgive him. He's probably, got bullets and guns around the head, around the house. But when you first look at the first page of the collation, where that starts after the introduction, you're hopeful you're going to read English. This is the last English you see on the page. It's going to be all like this. See, right after that, you start seeing English. It doesn't tell you. It's not systematic. Let's put it that way. And then it goes on and on and on and on. So it's useless. It's useless for most people. You'd have to, sit down there and read carefully his handwritten versions of words in Greek, and actually he's maybe used typeface of Greek. But the bottom line is, this is not how to present this to the public so the public can see what are the variants between the Codex Sinaiticus and the current version. And that might be deliberate. I just want to say this is, I have no reason to suspect Mr. Scrivener of any underhandedness. But if you don't want people to know what the variants are, you would do something like this. You make it as obscure as possible. So only a scholar who knows top-level Greek is going to be able to decipher this book. And it would take months to find everything that you want to find. So nothing is made easy here. It's all made difficult and impossible for the general person. Somebody someday has to go through. A good young person, I would suggest, as a project you go through and you compare the Textus Receptus against, maybe take Scrivener's Textus Receptus and then compare it to the text. The text, you're going to have to pull out every line, every line of the Sinaiticus from that online resource that I did tonight, which formed this box on the right side, and go through each and every verse and then do a true collation where the people can see what the verse is, translate it into English, and then what's different. And that would be helpful. That's what somebody has to do. Nobody has ever done it. All right, so I think we've proven beyond a reasonable doubt that there is a blatant fraud present in our current official English Sinaiticus translation, meaning that online collaboration of international scholars, they have the correct Greek, but the translation is completely missing the words good works in 2 Peter 1:10. And this likely was caused by the excitement of accepting the work of persons produced by the heirs of a man who last worked on in 1872 and probably never saw the manuscript and was probably would never have endorsed the way the book was titled and being sold as a work of a true translation of the Codex Sinaiticus. So something has to be done, and I think I'm going to try to find a way to contact the project here and tell them you need to correct this verse itself, and then maybe as a scholarly team, why didn't you do a new English translation? Do what this man said he did, but he obviously didn't do. And you can read between the lines of the Bible Researcher webpage and Mr. Snyder's, that it's obvious that this man's translations cannot be trusted as a true translation of the actual Greek of the Sinaiticus. And that also means, all my friends, as I'm trying to teach you how you have to do Bible research, we now have another layer of complexity. Anytime you want to look at the Codex Sinaiticus, you cannot simply trust what the translation is in the box, in the computer box. You have to pull out the text each time. Do what I did. If you're not sure, just run it through the Greek translator on Google, and then you'll words will pop out, and then sit down and do a true Greek translation if you have that capacity. If you don't, then maybe if you have clues from the Google Translate, maybe send it out to somebody you know. You can send it to me, and you can ask me to do a Greek translation, and we'll do the best we can and get it back to you. And so, anyway, God bless. Take care, everyone. It never stops coming. These problems that the Pauline Church has created more corruptions than anybody can imagine, and this is perfect one. There is no reason why once the scholarship showed. Let's just quickly show that again here. Is you've got the Vulgate Latin. Both copies of Beza had good works. And then it turned out the Alexandrinus from the 400s that was given to the King of England in the 1620s, I think it was, by some people from Alexandria, claiming it was from Alexandria when it was really from Byzantine. Another story. And then the Codex Sinaiticus of 340s, through your good works. Public commentary was correct. So I have to apologize to public commentary. I thought they were wrong. Actually, I said that last time. I said, I don't know that I'll trust public commentary again. Well, I'm going to change my view. I would endorse public commentary over anybody else's commentary, because they must have dug into the Codex Sinaiticus themselves, or maybe someone in their circle did a personal translation and kept records of their translations. We now need to take those kind of efforts and put them back into the online version that's available at the quasi-official web page of the Codex Sinaiticus. All right, God bless everybody. Take care. Ciao. Bye.